Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. Our top story tonight, Canada Post workers have gone on strike. The Crown Corporation has stopped delivering mail across the country. That means some services to remote and northern communities that rely on Canada Post have also ground to a halt. The CBC's Mahnor Mubarak has more from Nunavut.
Around 55,000 workers have walked off the job, fighting for better wages, working conditions, and more. With no outgoing or incoming mail, residents in the north could see potential delays in delivery for mail that has already been ordered previously. CBC spoke with some people in Iqaluit on their thoughts on it.
Oh, I think I'm all full support. I think they need fair conditions, fair wages.
Nidhi Panwar is visiting Iqaluit from Toronto.
I was hoping to send a postcard to my niece and nephew in Vancouver, but I didn't realize that there's a strike.
She says she can imagine it being difficult for people in the north to not have access to Canada Post.
It's one of the ways to stay in touch in a remote place, so it's unfortunate.
It's an essential service for most of the people, and Christmas is coming, and we want to send all those wishes to our families.
Dave Lambert is a regional education and organization worker for the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. He says the work postal workers do helps connect northern and Indigenous communities.
Again, this decision is not taken lightly, is a last resort.
He says that the strike comes over a year of bargaining with Canada Post, and it seemed like the only option left for the union. While mail isn't being delivered, things like government benefit checks will still be delivered, like the Old Age Security, the Canada Child Benefit, and the Canada Pension Plan. Lambert says he hopes the strike will end soon so service can resume. Negotiations are still taking place. Mahnor Mubarak, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Postal workers are on the picket lines in Yellowknife today, too. While the strike will stop deliveries of packages and mail across Canada, officials in small northern communities say they could be the most impacted.
Most residents in the small communities rely on Canada Post for a lot of stuff. Nowadays everyone buys online, so of course everything there is shipped in by Canada Post. And if an individual needs their prescription drugs, that's all shipped in by Canada Post in most cases as well.
The Northwest Territories Health and Social Services Authority says it doesn't rely on Canada Post as its primary shipping service for pharmacies and warehouses. Some of its vendors may use Canada Post, and in those cases, the Health Authority says it'll work with them directly on other forms of shipping. The GNWT says it's also working to find other couriers to deliver territorial benefits. Those are things like income assistance that some people still get by mail. Right now, they are not expecting delays. Meanwhile, in the Yukon, 62 union members are off the job due to the strike. Cheryl Kawaja has that side of the story.
Under a full moon in the dark, Canada Post employees settle in on the strike line, setting up shop for an unknown amount of time. A pile of wood for the fire to take off the chill as the wind whips around the top of 2 Mile Hill in Whitehorse.
Can you help me, please? Absolutely. I need quite a few.
The local president of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers says the union demands speak to the northern experience.
Given the weight of inflation, and particularly in Whitehorse, people will understand that this is not a job we're out here making $70 an hour. Thank you. This is a job I'm out here making $21.80. And when you start talking about rent in Whitehorse, I don't think we're asking for unreasonable cost of living increases.
Union members will get strike pay when they show up to the picket line. It amounts to $56.20 a day. And for that, they're expected to do a minimum of 4 hours out here.
Time outside is actually one of the sticking points for the union. Mac Calhoun says Canada Post wants to take away what he calls inside time for carriers and add more delivery time.
So they want to up that from basically like 6 hours out walking outside to the full 8 hours walking outside. And you know that in January, this kind of thing, if you're delivering mail in 30 below on ice-covered streets.
While Canada Post service grinds to a halt across the country, there are small exceptions. Outside of Whitehorse, in communities like Dawson City, workers at the post office aren't part of the union. So today, people like Amélie Morin can pop in for packages. But there won't be any more mail coming in or going out. With national service interrupted, Morin says shopping for the holidays could be a challenge in small-town Yukon.
It might also inspire us to purchase local a little bit more. So, I guess we'll see how it unfolds.
Meanwhile, the union and Canada Post have agreed to one big dispensation. People waiting for socio-economic income support this month will be delivered their checks.
It's unclear just how long this strike might go on, but union members here in Whitehorse are hunkering down to stay warm. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Whitehorse.
A 53-year-old Fort Good Hope man pleaded guilty to manslaughter today in a Northwest Territories courtroom. It was in relation to the killing of a man in the community this past summer. Floyd Kakfwi had been charged with second-degree murder for the death of Harley Pirot on June 15th. But as the CBC's Nadir Hashmi reports, today he accepted a plea deal.
Accused Floyd Kakfwi was at the Yellowknife courthouse today wearing a long green t-shirt. His defense lawyer, Evan McIntyre, told the court that by pleading guilty to manslaughter, Kakfwi is waiving his right to a trial. Kakfwi accepted this in court, replying yes. Prosecutor Brendan Green then read an agreed statement of facts. On June 15th, he said Kakfwi and Harley Pirot were drinking at Kakfwi's house. An argument between them led to an altercation when Pirot refused to leave. Kakfwi then grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Pirot. He died in hospital 2 weeks later. RCMP initially charged Kakfwi with aggravated assault, but released him after an evacuation order was issued in Fort Good Hope due to wildfires. Pirot's family members shared their concerns to CBC previously that the evacuation may have interfered with the police investigation. A month after the incident, RCMP re-arrested Kakfwi and charged him with second-degree murder. Prosecutor Green told CBC today he did not wish to discuss the merits of the case, but said that the Crown had carefully reviewed the evidence and reached a reasonable resolution, the plea for a lesser charge of manslaughter, which the defense accepted. While there is no minimum sentence for manslaughter, the maximum is life imprisonment. Kakfwi's sentencing is scheduled next year for June 2025 in Fort Good Hope. Nadir Hashmi, CBC News, Yellowknife.
An Iqaluit man has been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for sexually assaulting a minor. 67-year-old Robert Sheaves was charged for offenses between July 2021 and February 2022. Justice Paul Bychuk handed down the sentence on Tuesday. He says Sheaves lured adolescent girls into his apartment with food, money, and cigarettes. Originally from Newfoundland, Sheaves served in the Canadian Armed Forces. He was the senior administrative officer in Grise Fiord in the early 2000s before moving to Iqaluit. Iqaluit police are investigating 36 reports of break-ins over the past 4 weeks. RCMP have released some pictures of some suspects. They say a number of businesses have been targeted, some multiple times.
What we've been seeing is mostly quick smash and grabs. Suspects breaking into locked-off doors or gaining forced entry through windows as well. Quickly looking for cash, valuables. Alcohol has been stolen as well, and fleeing within a short period of time. Most of these occurrences have been later in the evening, in the dark.
Police will also increase nightly patrols as part of a new action plan. Police want anyone with information about the incidents to get in touch. A national charity dedicated to protecting rights and freedoms is taking the city of Whitehorse to court. In a legal petition filed this month, the Canadian Constitution Foundation says the city's civility policy violates freedom of expression. The policy was adopted by council in August. It lays out a number of rules for people who want to participate in public city council meetings. But the foundation says those rules are too restrictive, to the point that they're unconstitutional. A lawyer with the foundation says he's shocked by how far several sections of the policy go.
For example, having city administration go through documents that people might share with council and decide whether or not those could be insulting to city council members. And, I respect city council members, but you do have a right to insult them. And so that's not something that the city should be doing.
Other rules the foundation takes issue with include a ban on signs and a requirement to cover up any attire deemed, quote, disrespectful. The city previously said the policy is meant to ensure a safe and respectful environment for all. A spokesperson declined to comment on the case. It's yet to be heard by a judge. Tensions ran high at the Yukon Legislative Assembly this week as politicians got their last jabs in, including the Yukon Party's leader accusing the Premier of being two-faced when talking with mining companies and First Nations. The CBC's Callie McTavish breaks it all down.
Official opposition leader Curry Dixon says Premier Raj Pillay is saying one thing to First Nations and something else to the mining community. He referenced a speech the Premier made to the Council of Yukon First Nations.
So on Monday, the Premier will speak to the mining industry about the future of the sector. Does he intend to remind the industry about their inherent desire to break the law, or will he have a different message for a different audience?
Pillay was quick to challenge the opposition's characterization.
That day, I spoke about the challenges of the mining sector, but what the member opposite leaves out is the first 2 to 3 paragraphs of the speech where I talked about the necessity of this industry, the good things this industry does, the contributions, how much it's an employer in the rural area. But I think it's probably, again, perpetuates a particular narrative, and it makes good political sense to chop and paste the way he wants.
The Yukon NDP is also challenging the government's record, this time on fertility treatments. The government is proposing covering up to $8,000 of fertility treatment. That's based on Manitoba's policy. But Manitoba recently increased their rate to $16,000. White says the Yukon government should do the same.
We've heard from Yukoners that they are considering moving out of the territory in order to start families. And we know of families who have already had to make that incredibly tough choice. Yukoners should not have to leave their home to start families. Yukoners should not have to go into debt to access the fertility support they need. And Yukoners should not have to wait years to start their families in hopes that this government will finally fulfill their promise.
Minister of Health Tracy Ann McPhee says she has no obligation to do that, and she says the Yukon is the only government that covers medical travel for those seeking fertility treatments. And in a last-minute upset, the Yukon Party hit pause on electoral boundary reform. Now, this conversation has been going on for months with representatives from all political stripes represented in the conversation. The Yukon Electoral District Boundaries Commission was proposing to increase the total number of electoral districts from 19 to 21. But the MLAs from Pelly-Nesutlan and Watson Lake said their communities had not been adequately consulted. The Yukon Party members say they do not feel there are sufficient links between the communities of Faro, Ross River, and Watson Lake. The notion that an MLA can travel between these communities year-round along the Robert Campbell Highway is simply incorrect. So why are they doing this? It's not clear. But I can tell you that the new boundaries would combine these two MLAs' districts, so one would be out of a job and the Yukon Party would have one less representative. Callie McTavish, CBC News, Whitehorse.
The government of the Northwest Territories is going to subsidize the price of fuel in Norman Wells, starting as early as Saturday. In a news release today, the government says these subsidies will reduce the wholesale price of gasoline by about 75 cents per litre and the cost of home heating fuel and diesel by about 86 cents per litre. The GNWT says it may take a bit longer for the subsidies to translate into lower costs for residents. That'll vary from supplier to supplier. Fuel prices and the overall cost of living in Norman Wells have jumped dramatically in recent months due to canceled barge shipments this year caused by low water levels. 3 NWT municipalities have teamed up against a proposed rate increase of nearly 25% on electricity prices. Yellowknife and Hay River say they've filed with the Public Utilities Board as interveners against the Northwest Territories Power Corporation's general rate application. They're hoping to keep rates as low as possible. Both mayors say delivering reliable and sustainable power to residents and businesses is of the utmost importance. Naka Power and Fort Smith have also applied to the Utility Board for intervention in the matter. Nunavut Incorporated is holding an election for president next month. And this year, they're offering $100 vouchers to eligible voters in the territory to encourage people to vote. But as the CBC's TJ Deere reports, the new strategy hasn't been without controversy.
Voter turnout in elections for Nunavut Incorporated has been very low. The 2021 presidential election saw 17.5% of eligible voters cast a ballot. So, for the first time, NTI is offering $100 vouchers to voters to encourage people to vote. Kilikva Kabluna is the chief executive officer of NTI. She challenged the potential perception that NTI is using the vouchers to buy votes.
People don't have to vote to receive the voucher. They will receive the voucher when they receive their ballot, and that's for efficiency. The voucher will be handed out at the same time as the ballot, but the poll clerks will not be monitoring whether a person has voted or not.
Former NTI Vice President James Ituluk says the vouchers are a good idea. He says it's important to get young people to vote.
There are many more of them today who are eligible to vote. Us older parents are not being listened to. We see that more and more.
A phone-in show was held on CBC Radio's Tausuni this afternoon, and Nunavummiut gave their opinions live on the air. Many callers were not in support of the program. Despite NTI's claims that it wasn't bribery, Leslie Kanguk of Pond Inlet says it is.
We're able to bribe our children like this. If you eat this, I'll get you this. We bribe them into it. That is how I see this move by NTI, like they're bribing. This is very wrong. We are talking about some serious money. This money could have been spent on something better.
As part of their voter engagement strategy, NTI is also encouraging voters to tune into the All Candidates debate on November 30th. They're also offering the 4 candidates a $5,000 travel allowance to visit as many communities as possible. Election Day is December 9th. TJ Deere, CBC News, Iqaluit.
The NWT government is still looking for someone to operate the liquor store in Inuvik. Liquor prices in the town increased significantly over the past month. The NWT finance minister says it's because of a high commission negotiated by the contractor hired to sell liquor in the community. But the contractor, the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation, has a slightly different explanation. The CBC's Des Loreen has more.
The last contract between the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation and the GNWT ended this past September. In a statement, the IRC said it agreed to extend the contract to operate the liquor store because the government hadn't found anyone else to do it. That extension expires at the end of the year. The GNWT is still having a hard time finding anyone to take over. On October 10th, they issued a request for proposals, or RFP, from companies interested in operating the liquor store in Inuvik. On November 5th, it extended the deadline for responses from November 8th until November 12th, which was this past Tuesday. On Wednesday, it canceled the RFP, typically an indication that there were no qualified responses. At the same time, the GNWT issued another RFP for anyone who had a building to house the liquor store. The IRC was the only one to bid on it. The IRC has refused to talk to CBC on the matter, and we're still waiting for a response from the GNWT. Des Loreen, CBC News, Inuvik.
The Salt River First Nation in Fort Smith is working to eliminate drug use in the NWT community. It's hosting a 3-day event next week to discuss the issue and look for solutions. As Carla Ulrich reports, there will be info sessions and guest speakers aimed at making a difference.
The organizers want to raise awareness and educate the community on illicit drug use in the North. An online poster for the event says it's an effort to save our community. The event will be held at the Salt River First Nation Conference Center from November 20th to the 22nd. Fort Smith resident Brad Tuckey is one of the speakers. In the past 2 years, Tuckey lost his son to fentanyl and his daughter to drug-related suicide. He hopes to see youth in the community attend the event. He says drug dealers target young people because of their vulnerability.
These drugs are pushed on them, and hard, because these guys are, like, the drug dealers that we know are drug dealers. They're not out selling them. They're getting younger people and our kids' friends to sell, right? And our kids are really at vulnerable ages. They don't know how to stand up. They are bullied.
Tuckey would like to see more community members come together and speak out. Hay River resident and former MLA Wally Schumann agrees. He lost his son to fentanyl nearly 3 years ago. He said that was a turning point for him.
Drugs don't have a bias against anyone, right from young people to old people. There's all different types of people that use drugs for different reasons, and we can clearly see the effects of what's happening in our community over the years.
Both fathers now take every opportunity they can to talk about their children, the good memories, but also how their deaths affected their families and friends. They hope their message can change the lives of others. CBC reached out to the Salt River First Nation chief, who is unavailable for comment. Carla Ulrich, CBC News, Fort Smith.
An organization offering another way forward for Nunavim youths struggling with substance abuse wants to expand its services. Sakayuk started up in Pavernatuk 10 years ago. Instead of jail, it promotes cultural healing and community interventions. One particular model is the mobile intervention team. In Pavernatuk, police officers are paired with social workers to respond to calls for police assistance.
It's a really good way of interacting and getting to know people on a personal level, instead of being seen as the outsider that comes and intervenes in criminal activities.
Sakayuk is currently in Pavernatuk, Kanekswiludjuak, Akulivik, Kangarsuk, Inukjuak, and Kudjuak. Eventually, they want to expand to all 14 villages in Nunavik. Does Whitehorse need a new swimming pool? The Glacier Bears sure think so. The city's swim team says the only pool in town at the Canada Game Centre is overwhelmed by the number of users.
Since the facility has been built in early 2000s, the city has grown so much. We have so many more people here. And with that, we have ourselves, the Whitehorse Glacier Bears, and other user groups that are have different wants and needs for the facility, not to mention the city trying to balance public access and lessons, and the facility just can't keep up.
The head coach says it's early days yet. The swim club is gathering data and in discussions with Sports Yukon about the possibility of another pool. The sun is setting earlier and earlier across the north, leaving us more and more in the dark. Soon enough, we'll be spending up to 20 hours or more each day in darkness. Tomorrow night, people in Yellowknife will be able to experience the dark in a new way. The World After Dark is an upcoming performance about the dark and how we relate to it. It's at the Northern Arts and Cultural Centre tomorrow, but I stopped by this afternoon to meet the show's choreographer and get a sneak peek.
One, policy.
First, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you and why are you here?
Hi, my name is Shannon Litzenberger. I'm the artistic director of Shannon Litzenberger Contemporary Dance and the choreographer and director of World After Dark.
We are on the stage in Yellowknife. This is where your performance will take place over the weekend. Tell me a little bit about the performance.
Yeah, so World After Dark is all about night. And so night, not just like the actual night, but also night as a metaphor for the sensual, for mystery, for the feminine. And so through the work, it's actually based on a book called Acquainted with the Night by Christopher Dudney, who's a Canadian author. And each chapter of the book is an hour of the night that journeys from sunset to sunrise. And so, there's many sort of themes that are explored in this scientific, poetic way, like the history of children's bedtime stories and insomnia and circadian rhythms and Jungian dream theory. And so we've taken aspects of that text in the book and those themes and transformed it into a work.
Okay. What was the process like to take a book and one that seems kind of so cerebral in certain ways and transform it into a work of art that's much more fluid and about movements?
Yeah. What I love so much about Christopher Dudney's writing is it's so imagistic, and it even though it also gives us a lot of scientific information, It also has this beautiful poetry that I think lends itself to expression through movement. And of course, like engaging in that content with movement also allows us to expand our experience into things that can't be explained with words. And I think that was something that was important to me in exploring this, is how is night embodied in us, and what are the feelings that we have, the sensations that we have that are connected to night and all the metaphors of night. And so the words help us kind of evoke a way into that, but then the movement helps us really feel and sense our way through the experience of night.
The night sky is a mosaic of fossil light.
And why did you want to bring the show to the north?
Oh my gosh, I have always wanted to bring my work to the north, and I couldn't imagine like a more appropriate subject matter to bring here. I mean, I was inspired to create this work because I found myself in the middle of a dark sky preserve, which is like a designation from the Royal Astronomical Society of spaces that are unaffected by artificial light. And I imagine that a lot of the far north is also that kind of space where we can experience night in that beautiful way, like in the way that our ancestors experienced night. And so I feel like Northerners understand this very well and also live through long seasons of darkness. And so, you know, this work takes us through a lot of different kinds of expression of night, like not just the quiet and contemplative side, but also, you know, the many, many colors and moods and energies that night brings. And so I'm actually just so thrilled for this work to meet audiences here, and the community has been so incredibly welcoming, and it's been really delightful so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good time to bring it because we're getting towards our longest night. We're having our longest periods of night. And so it's just a really good time to bring something that expresses night in an artistic way. Thank you so much for explaining it to us and sharing it with us.
Thank you. Thanks.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. We leave you tonight with some beautiful aerials of Iqaluit. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a great weekend.
Hi, I'm Michaela. I'm so happy to have these prosthetic legs. I wear them every day so I can do all the things I love to do. I like to hike, skate, and do gymnastics. Because of your donations, Lamps is able to give me these devices. When you donate, you help kids like me. Thank you!